Hi Rev golfers, welcome to the video series on driving the ball. Driving the ball is very important. The #1 ranked player in the world right now is Dustin Johnson. What is Dustin Johnson known for being prodigious about? He's known for driving the ball longer and straighter than anyone's ever hit it at that length. So the #1 ranked player in the world is the longest player in the world. Then we can look quite closely behind him. We have Jon Rahm and Justin Thomas. What do you know about them as well? Then we have Justin Rose. What do you know about him as well? They're all known. Bubba Watson, Dustin Johnson, Adam Scott, Rory McIlroy, all of those players are known as being some of the best drivers of the golf ball in the world. As time has moved on the PGA Tour, as courses have got longer, it's become a complete data advantage to be able to hit the ball a long way. And really, if I could hit the ball as far as I could and somewhat straight, I would take that over hitting it only 240 and in the fairway every time, because golf is about how close I can get the ball to the hole all the way till I make it. So the closer I am to it, from a geometric standpoint, I have an advantage at getting it closer on the next shot. In doing all the Rev golf schools I've done and working with amateurs for over 20 years, I think where the misinterpretation comes, where the driver swing gets really problematic, is that the setup is nowhere near to the setup in most of the other shots. So for example, if you were to look at how we've been taught and how we work when we're chipping, the ball's back in our stance, we're leaning to the left, and we're leaning the shaft forward. From here, that gives us the ability to create a downward angle of attack, allowing us to create friction, which is going to help us spin the ball. Now, by the time we get to a wedge shot on the course, ball's in the middle of our stance, shaft is slightly leaning still, and now if you'll look, you can see the angle of my shoulders is pretty neutral. And once I start moving, that angle is going to go downward and allow me again to control trajectory and spin. But the one thing we're looking for with PGA Tour players on wedge shots is the lowest possible launch angle with the highest possible spin rate. Then with the driver, we flip that. We're now looking for the highest possible launch angle with the lowest possible spin rate. So in order to get this golf ball to max out what it's going to do as it's going through lift and drag, a high launch and a low spin is going to give us more lift and less resistance and drag. So that's why I can't go over it enough times how important the setup is. And then to back up that understanding is the amount of experience I've had with amateur golfers who set up to a low lofted club like it's a high lofted club, and they get the same thing. They get a low launch and high spin. So that ball doesn't stay in the air very long, and then the whole time it's just getting hammered by gravity. So we're going to, in this video series, starting with the setup, show you how you can start to get better at that. So as I go back to my driver, and I put this ball on the tee, this doesn't seem like a big part of it, but what's the other thing that I see? I see people tee their driver really, really low. And maybe when we started learning, the driver heads weren't nearly as deep as they are now. So it's possible that with the driver heads, they used to be less deep from basically the bottom of the club to the top of it. So what would occur is we would probably set up and hit a little bit more like an iron. But as far as technology is moving, this equipment is meant to launch it high and spin it low. So we have to make sure that we're teeing it higher, because that's going to give us incentive as we go through this video series on learning how to hit up on the golf ball. But ideally, just to point it out first, when you're hitting drivers, it's very easy to set up what I've set up right here. Most of the time when I ask people where their ball position is, they say it's someplace, but when I take a picture of it, it's not even close to it. So keep this reminder, one, for alignment of my club face, and two, for my stance. So you can see now that that ball is almost directly under my left shoulder. The left shoulder is an important point because that's called the low point. The low point of the arc is where the club is done going down, is now starting to come up. So as it's swinging around us, it's moving from downwards to upwards. So as you can see from here, some people have been told to hit it further, get a wider stance. I want you to try different widths of stance, because a wide stance is not always the smartest thing for people to do, especially as this being the over 50 series. As we get older and we spend time in our cars and in planes and in our office sitting down, we lose a lot of the mobility in our pelvis and our hips, which are allowed to help us to rotate. So where we're supposed to move, we stop moving, and we become more so this way rather than in prime position to rotate. So ideally, if we get too wide of a stance, that's going to cause me internally to rotate even less than I already can. So I would like you to play around. A wide stance for Henrik Stenson is perfect. But if you look at a player like Nicholas Kolsarts, who's longer than Henrik Stenson, he stands with his feet like this. So width of stance has got very little to do with the distance you'll hit the ball, except when you make it match the unique qualities of how you generate force out of the ground. So that I'm going to leave with you to go out and experiment and test. But this is about customization within principle. This is not one size fits all. So I personally am kind of right in between. I'm vanilla. This would be really wide. This would be really narrow. I kind of support the stance lines under my pelvis. So when we've always told that the stance need to be shoulder width apart, our legs are not attached to our shoulders, okay? Our legs are attached to our pelvis. So the femur connects in here to create the hip. So I don't want to get that angle where it's creating too much of that, because that's going to affect how I rotate and then affect how I'm able to actually push off. So for me, vanilla is probably the way for most people. It's not shoulder width apart, it's pelvic width apart. So then we'll see in many different videos how people talk about getting the necessary tilt of the spine, which allows us or helps us to have a better opportunity to hit up on the ball. So some people talk about putting the left hip up. Some people talk about dropping the right hip down. I want you to think about this as me bending through my rib cage. So I'm not really changing the orientation of how I'm in the ground by doing all of this, which I would say is a little more fake. It's more a function of I'm getting my side bend by that. So ways you can start to feel that is just set up normal, and without really using your hand, is just start to bend from the spine where you feel like the right hand gets lower than the left. So that's still giving me the ability to be how I need to be in my pelvis and my feet, but it's giving me the ability with that tilt to ensure I've got one more chance, and a chance that I have to control, to hit up on the golf ball. So once again, ball position is forward.